There are moments in life when we feel small, overwhelmed, and unable to face the challenges before us. Fear creeps in, doubts grow louder, and we wonder if we have the strength to continue. Yet in those very moments, God's power is closest to us. He does not call the strong. He does not wait for the fearless. He calls those who are willing to open their hearts, to reach out, and to trust Him even when the path seems impossible. Strength is not found in our own abilities alone, nor is courage born from the absence of fear. True strength and true courage come from surrendering our weakness to God, from allowing His Spirit to rise within us and carry us beyond our limitations. Consider the countless lives that have been transformed when ordinary people chose to trust in Him. A parent struggling to provide for a family finds unexpected resources and guidance when they seek His help. A student facing failure discovers resilience and clarity in moments of prayer and reflection. A community divided by fear, uncertainty, or loss becomes united, compassionate, and determined when its members turn their hearts to Him and embrace His strength. It is in the weakest moments that God's power is most evident, turning despair into hope, doubt into faith, and weakness into unwavering determination. Fear has a way of paralyzing us, convincing us that we are alone, that the weight of the world is more than we can bear. But God reminds us that fear is not the final word. Even when we tremble, even when our knees shake, He is there to lift us, to steady our steps, and to give us the courage to face the trials before us. Courage does not mean the absence of fear. It means moving forward despite fear, trusting that God's hand will guide us, and believing that His presence is more powerful than any obstacle. Every time we choose courage over retreat, every time we take one more step when we feel we cannot, we participate in the miracle of transformation that only faith can create. The world may look for strength in power, in wealth, or in influence, but God calls us to a higher understanding. True strength is revealed in patience when the storms rage, in kindness when the world is cruel, and in steadfast faith when everything seems lost. True courage shines when we stand for what is right, when we speak truth in the face of opposition, and when we embrace our mission knowing that God equips the weak to do extraordinary things. No one is too small, no life too ordinary, and no fear too great for Him to turn into a testimony of triumph. Even in the darkest nights, even when our hearts feel heavy, God's promise remains. His strength will sustain the weary, His courage will embolden the timid, and His Spirit will rise in those who call upon His name. Each step taken with faith becomes a declaration that fear does not define us, weakness does not limit us, and uncertainty does not control our future. The power to endure, to overcome, and to shine comes from a source that never fails, never tires, and never abandons. Today, hear the message clearly. You do not have to be strong to prevail, and you do not have to be fearless to take the next step. God's strength is made perfect in our weakness, and His courage is alive in our fear. Trust Him, follow Him, and step boldly forward, for with His power within you, nothing is impossible, and no fear can stand against the faith-filled heart. There are moments in life when we feel utterly powerless, when the weight of responsibility, the trials of circumstance, and the uncertainty of the future press down on us with unbearable force. In these moments, it is easy to look to our own strength, to rely on what we can control, and to assume that we must carry the burden alone. Yet the prophet's message reminds us that true strength is not born from our own abilities. It is found when we acknowledge our limitations and turn to God, the source of all power, who lifts the weak, strengthens the weary, and empowers those who feel incapable of moving forward. It is in our weakness that His strength becomes most evident, and in our surrender that miracles unfold. History and Scripture are filled with examples of God using the weak to accomplish extraordinary things. Think of the shepherd who became a king, armed only with faith and a simple sling. Consider the countless people who, when faced with overwhelming odds, were sustained by a power far greater than their own. It is never the human strength that prevails, but the strength of God working through those who humble themselves and recognize their dependence on Him. Each struggle, each moment of inadequacy is an invitation to experience His power in ways that exceed our understanding. When we admit that we cannot do it alone, we open the door for God to fill the void with His unwavering strength, guiding our steps and providing the courage to continue when we feel we have nothing left to give. God's strength in our weakness also brings clarity and perspective. When we are consumed with self-reliance, fear and doubt often cloud our vision, making challenges appear larger than they truly are. But when we turn our eyes to Him, we see that no mountain is too high, no obstacle insurmountable, and no situation beyond His power to redeem. This realization transforms our hearts and minds, giving us the confidence to face difficulties with a calm assurance that we are not alone, that our limitations do not define us, and that His strength is available at every moment we call upon Him. Strength in weakness is not passive. It requires action rooted in faith. It is the willingness to move forward despite fear, to make decisions when uncertainty looms, and to serve others even when we feel inadequate. God does not promise to remove all challenges, but He does promise to equip us with exactly what we need to endure, to persevere, and to triumph. Every act of courage, every decision to trust Him in our weakness becomes a testament to His power and a living example of how ordinary people, through reliance on God, can achieve the extraordinary. In our weakest moments, when we feel the most vulnerable, we are closest to experiencing God's strength. It is here, in the depth of our need, that His power shines brightest, reminding us that no limitation is too great, no fear too strong, and no circumstance too impossible to overcome when we place our trust in Him. Fear is one of the most powerful forces in life. It can paralyze us, cloud our judgment, and convince us that we are incapable of facing the challenges before us. Every person at some point experiences fear. Fear of failure, fear of loss, fear of the unknown. Yet the prophet's message reminds us that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward in spite of it. Courage is choosing to take that next step, to stand firm and to act boldly, even when the heart trembles and the path ahead is uncertain. God does not call us to be fearless. He calls us to trust Him in our fear, to allow His strength to empower us when our own resolve falters. Consider the countless examples of ordinary people who found courage when they had every reason to be afraid. The single mother who faces financial insecurity yet continues to provide for her children, working tirelessly day after day, finds courage she did not know she possessed because she relies on God's guidance and provision. The young student, overwhelmed by the expectations and pressures of life, discovers the courage to stand up for truth and justice, knowing that God walks beside them every step of the way. Even communities facing disasters, conflict, or division have shown remarkable courage when they turn to God, leaning on His strength to face circumstances that might otherwise seem insurmountable. Courage is not the absence of struggle. It is the presence of faith strong enough to overcome fear. Courage in the face of fear is contagious. When one person acts bravely, it inspires others to rise above their own doubts. When someone chooses faith over fear, hope spreads. The prophet's message reminds us that God's Spirit works within each of us, lifting hearts, steadying hands, and providing the resolve to persevere. Fear is natural, but it is not the final word. Every step taken in faith, every act of courage in the presence of fear becomes a testimony to God's power at work within us, showing that even the timid and uncertain can achieve greatness when they place their trust in Him. God's promise is clear. He does not abandon us in moments of fear. When the storms of life rage and the winds of doubt howl, He provides the courage we need to endure, to act, and to persevere. Courage grows when we surrender our fear to Him, when we acknowledge that we are not alone, and when we allow His guidance to direct our steps. Each act of bravery, no matter how small, is a declaration that fear will not define us, that doubt will not control us, and that God's power is greater than any challenge we face. In the face of fear, courage becomes the bridge between despair and triumph, weakness and strength, hesitation and action. The prophet's words remind us that fear is temporary, but faith and courage endure. God gives the timid boldness, the hesitant resolve, and the fearful a steadfast heart. When we step forward trusting in Him, we discover that courage is not a gift reserved for the strong, but a power available to every believer willing to trust, obey, and act in His name. Faith is the invisible anchor that holds us steady when storms rage around us. It is the quiet, unshakable trust that God is with us, even when circumstances seem impossible, and that His power can accomplish what our own strength cannot. The prophet's message reminds us that faith is not merely a feeling or a hopeful wish. It is a deliberate choice to trust God in every situation, to place our hearts and lives in His hands, and to act with the assurance that He will guide us through even the most overwhelming challenges. Faith transforms ordinary lives into extraordinary testimonies, giving hope where there was despair, courage where there was fear, and direction where there was confusion. Consider the countless lives touched by faith. A man burdened with debt and uncertainty may feel hopeless, yet when he turns to God with sincerity and reliance, he finds the wisdom, perseverance, and opportunities to rebuild his life. A student struggling with failure discovers the motivation and resilience to continue, empowered by the belief that God has a plan greater than their present difficulties. Even communities fractured by hardship or injustice have experienced transformation when they collectively place their faith in God, choosing to act in accordance with His will and trusting Him to guide their efforts. Faith is not passive. It requires action, obedience, and the willingness to step forward even when the outcome is unknown. Faith also reshapes perspective. It allows us to see beyond immediate circumstances and focus on the bigger picture that God has in mind. What seems like failure or loss in the moment can be part of a greater plan of growth, learning, and eventual triumph. The prophet's revelation reminds us that faith provides clarity in uncertainty, courage in fear, and strength in weakness. It teaches us that our limitations do not define us, our mistakes do not disqualify us, and our present struggles are not the final chapter. God's power becomes evident in our lives when faith is allowed to guide our decisions, actions, and attitudes, transforming ordinary experiences into lessons of grace, perseverance, and hope. Moreover, faith inspires others. When people witness the impact of steadfast trust in God, they are encouraged to place their own lives in His hands. Faith spreads through communities, influencing families, workplaces, and neighborhoods. It is contagious because it demonstrates that transformation is possible and that God's presence can turn fear into courage, weakness into strength, and despair into hope. Faith is a force that turns potential into reality. It is the foundation upon which courage is built, the light that illuminates the path through darkness, and the key that unlocks the extraordinary power of God in everyday life. The prophet's message calls us to embrace faith fully, to trust without reservation, and to allow God to transform not only our circumstances, but our hearts, minds, and lives. Through faith, the weak become strong, the fearful become bold, and ordinary people accomplish extraordinary things when they place their lives in God's hands. Life is rarely a smooth journey. Every person encounters trials, moments that test patience, strength, and faith. These trials may come in the form of illness, loss, betrayal, financial hardship, or unexpected change. The prophet's message reminds us that trials are not signs of God's absence or punishment, but opportunities for growth, refinement, and a deeper connection to Him. Perseverance is the act of enduring these challenges with faith, holding fast to God's promises and refusing to allow adversity to define or destroy us. It is in the crucible of hardship that character is forged, courage is strengthened, and faith becomes unshakable. Consider the stories of ordinary people who persevered through extraordinary difficulties. A widow struggling to provide for her children may feel despair at every turn, yet by trusting in God, she discovers the inner resilience to continue each day, finding strength she did not know existed. A man facing the loss of employment may be tempted to give up, but through prayer, patience, and steadfast faith, he uncovers new opportunities, experiences personal growth, and emerges stronger than before. Even communities ravaged by natural disasters or social strife have demonstrated remarkable endurance when they come together, leaning on God's guidance, supporting one another, and refusing to let circumstances crush their spirit. Perseverance transforms fear and uncertainty into hope, action, and progress. Trials also teach lessons that cannot be learned in comfort or ease. They reveal priorities, test values, and illuminate what is truly important in life. The prophet's message calls Americans to embrace challenges not with despair, but with trust in God's plan, understanding that every struggle carries a purpose and that endurance produces results beyond immediate comprehension. Each hardship faced with faith becomes a testimony of God's presence, a living example of how perseverance turns obstacles into opportunities and weakness into strength. Faith and perseverance are inseparable. Without trust in God, trials can become overwhelming and fear may take root. But when faith guides us, perseverance becomes more than enduring. It becomes purposeful, focused, and transformative. It allows us to rise above temporary suffering, see beyond immediate setbacks, and maintain hope even when circumstances appear insurmountable. God strengthens those who refuse to surrender, offering courage when human resolve falters and lifting spirits when the weight of life grows heavy. Perseverance through trials also inspires others. When people witness courage, patience, and unwavering faith in the face of adversity, they are encouraged to face their own challenges with similar determination. The prophet's message reminds us that God uses perseverance not only to strengthen the individual, but to create ripples of hope, inspiration, and transformation in families, communities, and nations. Every step taken with faith, every challenge met with courage, and every obstacle overcome by reliance on God becomes evidence that no trial is too great for His power to sustain us. Through perseverance, the weak become resilient, the fearful become steadfast, and ordinary lives are transformed into extraordinary testimonies of God's faithfulness, power, and love. Hope is a gift from God, a light that shines even in the darkest of times. It is the quiet, unwavering assurance that no matter how heavy our burdens, how deep our struggles, or how uncertain our future may seem, God is with us, guiding our steps, strengthening our hearts, and opening doors that we cannot yet see. The prophet's message reminds us that hope is not wishful thinking or a fleeting optimism. It is a steadfast trust in God's promises, a confidence that His plans are greater than our fears and that His timing is perfect, even when ours is impatient. Hope fuels courage, strengthens resolve, and inspires action, transforming despair into determination and weakness into resilience. Consider the lives of ordinary people who have found hope in impossible situations. A father who has lost his job yet continues to provide for his family discovers renewed strength when he trusts God to provide. A young woman facing illness clings to the hope that healing and peace are possible, drawing courage and endurance from her faith. Communities struck by natural disasters, division, or economic hardship rebuild not through their own power alone, but through hope rooted in God's promises. Hope ignites the heart to act, to persevere, and to believe that the worst is not the end, and that God's love will carry them through every trial. Hope also transforms perspective. When fear tempts us to retreat and despair convinces us to give up, hope reminds us that the present is not the final chapter of our story. God's hand is at work in every difficulty, every setback, and every challenge, turning obstacles into opportunities, suffering into growth, and uncertainty into purpose. The prophet's message calls us to embrace hope as an active force, one that motivates us to continue moving forward even when the path seems unclear. Hope gives vision where doubt clouds judgment, courage where fear threatens to paralyze, and strength where human endurance fails. Moreover, hope is contagious. When one person lives with faith-filled hope, it inspires those around them to trust, act, and endure. Families, neighborhoods, and communities become strengthened when hope spreads through collective belief in God's power and provision. The prophet's words remind us that hope is not passive. It requires engagement, persistence, and reliance on God's guidance. Each act of hope fuels perseverance, inspires others, and demonstrates that God's power is greater than any challenge we face. Hope reminds us that nothing is permanent except God's love, and that He is always at work to turn trials into testimonies, weakness into strength, and fear into courage. It is hope that empowers the weak to stand, that emboldens the fearful to act, and that transforms ordinary lives into extraordinary examples of God's faithfulness. When we hold fast to hope, we discover that no challenge is too great, no fear too overwhelming, and no darkness too deep to overcome with God's power guiding our hearts and lighting our path. God never intended for us to walk through life alone. He has designed us to thrive in community, to lift one another when burdens feel too heavy, and to encourage one another when fear threatens to paralyze. The prophet's message reminds us that the Spirit of God works not only within each individual, but also among us collectively, strengthening bonds, inspiring courage, and creating a support that transforms ordinary people into a powerful force for good. When we embrace this divine unity, we discover that no challenge is too great, no struggle too overwhelming, and no fear too strong to overcome. The Spirit of God binds us together, giving strength to the weak, courage to the fearful, and hope to the hopeless. Consider the power of communities who trust in God together. Families facing loss find comfort in the prayers and presence of one another. Neighborhoods devastated by disaster rebuild not through the effort of a single person, but through shared faith, cooperation, and collective determination. Even nations in times of crisis experience revival and restoration when individuals rise together, led by God's Spirit to serve, protect, and uplift their neighbors. Unity magnifies the effect of faith. What one person can achieve alone is limited, but when hearts and minds are joined in trust and action guided by God, miracles happen. The Spirit of God also provides support in ways that surpass human understanding. In moments of fear or exhaustion, we feel strength renewed, clarity restored, and courage awakened. It is as though an invisible hand steadies our steps, whispers reassurance to our hearts, and reminds us that we are never truly alone. The prophet's message emphasizes that God's presence within and among us is a continuous source of empowerment. No matter the obstacles we face, the Spirit can provide the encouragement and guidance to keep moving forward, to continue trusting, and to act boldly in ways that we might not have thought possible on our own. Unity through God's Spirit teaches compassion, patience, and empathy. When we recognize that our struggles are interconnected, we learn to bear one another's burdens, to speak words of encouragement, and to extend acts of service to those in need. The prophet reminds us that no act of kindness or support is insignificant. Each prayer offered for another, each hand extended in help, each moment of shared courage strengthens the entire community and reinforces the reality that God's Spirit is alive and active in our lives. Ultimately, unity and support from God's Spirit transform weakness into strength and fear into boldness. When we rely on Him, we find ourselves lifted beyond our own limitations, buoyed by the love, guidance, and encouragement that He provides. The prophet's words remind us that we are never alone, that together under God's guidance we can overcome adversity, and that His Spirit works within and among us to create a force stronger than any fear, more resilient than any weakness, and more enduring than any challenge.